we just recently agreed, because ultimately it's the chairman's decision, but we're trying to work together. One of the previous committee hearings that we had was on permitting, and the issue of permitting in the Virgin Islands and how it has stymied some economic development, the time and length of, that it takes, the repetitiveness of permitting process. The next one that he and I have agreed that we will have, maybe we don't go back until September, so it may be October or November, where we have a hearing on the relationship between the parks and the communities in which they are supposed to serve. To have a discussion about best practices and not so good practices around the country and how those things interplay. Because of the changes that are occurring, not only in the administration, but in how funding, how structure is going to take place. Also, some of the issues that have arisen here in the Virgin Islands. I'm grateful to the people of the Virgin Islands, particularly this community, to discuss with us the problems, issues, challenges, opportunities that you believe you have with the parks, to be able to bring representatives of the parks and the decision makers that are related to those issues. It is really important that you speak through to me and that I can take those issues back to Washington or have them work here in the community in which they serve, but also to have the people who are actually the ones that you are interacting with at the local level and at the regional level as well. So we have here to address those questions that you all have. What we're going to do is I'm going to do the opening, then I will let Stan Austin, who is the Southeast Regional Director of the National Parks, speak with you all. He is in Atlanta, right? And he has responsibility over the 9 states from Kentucky down to the Virgin Islands for the parks. And then Randy pronounce your last name. You say it first. Lavasseur, who is now the Caribbean Regional Park Superintendent. And then Jane, who is here with you all on a daily basis on St. John, who has responsibility as the acting superintendent for the St. John, for the Virgin Islands National Parks in St. John. Okay, we're also going to have this same meeting on St. Croix on Monday. Stan, you will be there, as well as Randy will be there, and then Joelle Tutine, who is the park superintendent on St. Croix, will be at a meeting for the community to ask them questions as well. Okay? There are several things that I've heard from you all on a variety of issues. Of course, because of the size of the park and its importance, it has to have a well-functioning relationship with the people that are on St. John, as well as the larger people of the Virgin Islands. The park is here to serve us and to serve the people of the United States. We are members and citizens of the United States, so it is here to serve us as well. And so the issues that everyone has with regard to property rights, with regard to access to the park, we are one of the few parks that have in its enabling legislation that there's supposed to be local hiring within the park. That is supposed to take place. There's also the relationship that the parks have with our community in terms of our children. So one of the things that I was really adamant about was reinvigorating and bringing back the youth program on St. John to ensure that our young people have that opportunity. There are also issues on St. Croix with regard to fishing boundaries because of the Buck Island issues there, and so many others that you all have expressed to me. I have issues with regard to interpretation. I believe that the park does too much interpretation of just Danish history and not enough about African and Taino history as well, which is integral to its viability and to its relevance to the people and the community in which it serves. So I've had discussions with Stan about that as well. So this is your meeting with the members of the park when it's necessary and I have information or answers to your questions, I can chime in. But the point was for you all to be able to express as Virgin Islanders, as residents of this community, what your concerns, what your ideas are, because some of it is not just, we just don't have complaints, Sam, we have ideas that we think that will make the park a better place, and it can be directed to the appropriate level of access. Jane, of course, is right here, so if it's relevant to the immediacy of what is happening locally, then those questions with Sam will be directed to her, or to Randy, or to you as the regional director. Okay? So,
all right.
Again.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay? I need a microphone. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you, Congressman Velasquez. And she was somewhat modest because Congressman Platt has been very active in working with me as a regional director. And to put it all in context, I have 9 states, I have 70 units in this region, including the Caribbean, and about 4,000 employees with over a $600 million budget. So that said, having the relationship as the Congressman Velasquez as the chair of the subcommittee is very important to all of you and to me. Many times I have been in her office when she had questions from some of you with my director, who was appointed by Trump. We have an acting now, but who was appointed by Obama. He's still there acting until he's replaced. But right now, Michael Reynolds is the director of the National Park Service acting. And he and I have a personal kind of conversation with the Congresswoman, because she'll call and say, Stan, can you look into this? And if I don't get that answer, she'll call my boss, but we have a great working relationship. So I want to commend her for setting up this meeting, because this is rare. You know, think about it. I have 9 states. I have 64 congressional districts. I want to introduce today Milwaukee here. She's my communications and legislative affairs person out of Atlanta, so she handles all the connections with the congressional staffers and also congressional staff in every state that we have in the United States. So, you know, I think it's important because I've been in this position for 4 years. And I want to admit I have Caribbean roots because I'm the first regional director that have been down to the Caribbean over 7 times. You know, if you look at all the parks that I have 70 units, and I've already been to 69 of them in 4 years. To put that into context of why this is over, being here 8 times, there are some regional directors that have never been here but once in their whole tenure over 4 or 5 years. So that shows you my commitment to all of you, that I want to hear your voices. I want this to be a dialogue, because it's really important for Jane, Randy, and I to understand your needs, the public, the friends groups, and all of our partners there, because together we can move forward. So I don't want to relive the past, so let's put that in context here. Let's see how we can take this and move forward. Now, you guys heard a couple of weeks ago about something called a realignment. So I want to clear the air that, I know Randy was here last week and some of you might have heard it, but for those of you who don't understand what that means, I'll kind of put it into context. You know, we're in a new administration now. So part of that administration, but this has been ongoing even when President Obama was there. We have to start looking at direct line authority. So I'll give you an example. In the regional office, I have 70 units in 9 states. And that includes Great Smoky Mountains, Virgin Islands, Cape Hatteras, Martin Luther King site. I can go on, you know, many, many sites throughout those states. So I have 3 deputies. So the regional director and 3 deputies. Each deputy divides those sites up to about 20 or so each. We were told that we have to downsize to 1 deputy. So those direct reports will be coming up. And I'm a hands-on manager. I want to talk to Jane or Randy or Joelle, but when I'm losing staff, so the next thing, realignments, and most of you, I understand, corporations are doing it all the time, reorganizations, realignments, and what that realignment means, from here above, that deputy that used to report to, his name was Barkley, he moved on, had the Virgin Islands for me. We just are moving it down to Randy, who's the GS-15 manager in San Juan. The good thing is he's 90 miles away. He can get here in an hour. It takes me 3.5 hours to get here. And with 70 units, you can see being here 8 times in the last 4 years is really something that most regional directors can't do. And that's because I believe in all of you and what I want to hear. So the realignment is technically, when Jane makes a phone call as the superintendent here, she'll call Randy. She and Randy will discuss something like, hey, how can we share some resources? Randy, can I do a hire? And she'll say, well, let's talk about it. You know, she'll still do local decision making here, but instead of calling Atlanta, she's calling Randy. Then Randy will determine with Jane what that decision would be. And Jane can still call me, because that's what chain of command's about. If she says, well, Randy, I don't really agree with that, or let's talk to stand together. That's what, but that cuts down. So that's not only happening here, it's happening across the country. You know, the next 3 weeks I'm going to be on the road. I'm going to Cape Hatteras in the next week. Same thing. For those of you who know the North Carolina coast, it's coastal. Cape Hatteras, big fishing area, Cape Lookout. We have 2 managers there, similar situation. That manager will answer to Cape Hatteras, and then Cape Hatteras would answer to me. So it makes sense, you know. I use the example all of us have been to airports. When you go to an airport, you'll see Enterprise, Avis, and Thrifty. Does everyone realize the same company owns all 3, but they're independent? You know, the back doors, they have one CEO. But same with these parks. Joel in St. Croix will continue, no change in name since that rumor went out there. It's not going to be run by San Juan. It's only going to be a line of authority. Everything below Randy, back to the park level, the decision maker, it will be local. And that's what community engagement is all about. I need you all to help us move forward, to find out how we can take this beautiful treasure resource, one of the iconic parks in this region. I guess that's part of the reason why I like to come down here. We all know this beautiful place, but at the same time, how do we manage it toward the future to engage the community? The visitation is up nationwide. More visitors are going to keep coming here, but you're going to have traffic and cars, and we have to work together, whether it's the taxi drivers or the concessionaires or the Friends group. We all have to be one because we're one community, and that's why it's so important that we have this dialogue. But I don't want this to be the first time. You know, I want us to continue the dialogue, and I have a commitment from Jane and Randy that they will have these meetings, and maybe some group meetings, maybe some of the questions that come out today, you'll be able to say, well, let's have a group of citizens, Park Service employees, concessionaires, parkers, get together in a room and talk about it. They're tough decisions, I can't deny. And just imagine, I have 70 of these units. Every unit is unique. Everyone loves their park, but we have to have community engagement. So one thing that Secretary Zinke, I really agree with him on, is put things down to the lowest level, let the locals have a say in where their communities and with the Park Service are going. But the parks are a national park. That's why we call them national parks. So I need everyone to understand that too. Your taxpayers are part of that, and but nationwide, someone in Alaska that comes here, or someone from New York City, we're protecting this for future generations to enjoy. These beautiful coral reefs and things. But I consider you all the best protectors. Your children are the ones that, and your grandchildren, we want to preserve this place, but at the same time, we want to be a good neighbor and work with you. So that said, I'm going to turn it over to Randy, who will put it into context. I want to take any questions, so we're clearly here on the whole realignment.
Can I just ask before you turn over to Randy to clear up two things that you mentioned? So, as Randy now, as this cluster person, is he still responsible for San Juan as well?
No, well, all 3. So he's what we call the group superintendent. So he's in charge of San Juan, who will have a superintendent similar to Jane, and St. Croix, who's Joel. Many of you know Joel over there, he's been here for a long time, will be the superintendent. St. Croix and Jane will be here. So San Juan's is vacant right now, but there'll be 3 separate units, separate budgets. We have a thing called the Green Book that Virgin Islands and the Coral Reef Monuments, they get their budget every year. Randy can't go in there and say, hey, I'm going to take that money and move it to San Juan. Legally, he can't. But what he can do is they call Jane, I have some extra money in San Juan, and you have a need for a YCC program to expand it. Let me see if I can loan you some money, or we can share. The other thing is, I need an electrician, and we have someone, or we need someone to make some delicate masonry work or something, so we could share resources that way and look at best use of our resources so that we could get more people on the ground and really develop people to move up.
And I know this is touchy, but how was he selected as the person?
Now, Randy was selected, so
Randy's the GS-15 San Juan superintendent. The way that the agency is working it, Jane was the acting here, and Joelle's a 14. Joelle was actually offered a detail opportunity to come back to St. John and made the decision. I mean, he's in the twilight like I am of our career. Some people don't want to make a move. So what we were doing in all the parks, and similar to our Atlanta parks, for those of you who've been to Atlanta, you think of MLK site, and we have two other sites. We have 115, 113, and 114. Simple situation. It's not about the person, it's about the position. So if Bryant was still here, he probably would have had more seniority, and he would have been the group superintendent until he retired. So that's how it works. So it's not about the position. So that position, so if Randy leaves next year, that position could be announced anywhere. So it could be Joelle and that 15 could be in St. Croix. Jane could be here with that 15. Group superintendent for the Caribbean. So you follow me? So that 15 will be announced. If Randy left out, the announcement would come out, Caribbean Park superintendent, either location. So we do that all the time. So that's the way it would work.
That was it.
Okay.
Okay, and so now Randy's going to...
Well, I can take some questions in a
No.
minute. You want him?
Randy, and then Jane, and then...
I'll open it up, okay.
Okay?
And before we move on, if we, the cell phones,
Please
if
put
we
your
can
cell
put
phones
on
on vibrate.
so it doesn't interrupt the conversation. Thank you.
So I introduced Randy Officer, and he's will tell you all about himself. A lot of you already know him because I was walking down the street with him today. They don't know me, they're stopping us and saying hi to Randy.
Good to see everybody again. The love that I've been shown here in this short time is awesome. Just really, really appreciate it. Congresswoman, thank you for having this forum. Stan, thank you for coming all over out. I also want to thank the Unity Day group, who has really been very vocal and wanted to have some answers, but also Spencer, who is the very first person that called my office, and he called up and he wanted to hear what was going on. And this level of engagement right off the bat was just really, really awesome. So thank you for all the support. Stan hit pretty much everything, and I see a lot of the same faces here. I will be traveling between all three parks quite often. In 2 weeks, I'll be spending a week here. Next week, I'll be going out to St. Croix, and then spending 3 days in San Juan. So I'll be traveling quite a bit throughout all three national parks to support the superintendents, especially as this transition happens. And a lot of the things that I've been hearing about, I'm really concerned about, and that's the lack of engagement that's been happening with the community. And admittedly, from the superintendents, it hasn't been happening, and that needs to change. So I'll be spearheading heavy talks with the community. This won't be the last time that we meet. I've already committed to several groups that I hold specific meetings with the superintendent just to figure out parking issues, just to figure out different concession things. So we'll be meeting quite a bit, and I hope we have this engagement turnout in all those different things. So I don't want to be long-winded, so I'll turn this over to Jake.
Good evening, everyone. I don't really know that I have anything much more to say than these guys have already said. If you have any issues or you'd rather go through and start to follow up, our office is always open. I'd like to let you know that you come in. I know I've seen many of your faces in the building before. I think where we sit over on the other side of the basin. I've been here, just to give you a little background on me, I've been here since May of 2014. And I was the deputy superintendent when Brian Fitzgerald was our last superintendent here. So, been around working through...
Brian retired.
Right, Brian retired as of last January the 3rd, and so I've been acting in his position since then. And that's really, I just want to let you know that we're open to listen, and I'm ready for questions. I don't know if there's anything more specifically that you would like to ask.
We just want to look at the organizations below, like
Who works with
who
you?
works for you and visions and just people understand.
Sure. So Virgin Islands National Park is about 48 employees right now. We have a whole slew of them are sitting over here in the corner, and a couple more scattered about. We have a number of different divisions. So there's a group that does all facilities work, maintenance, cleaning up trash, doing water, wastewater treatment, things like that. We have another group that does interpretation, that's talking to the visitors and working in the visitor center and going out and about and doing tours and things like that. They also do social media. I don't hope that you've been on our social media website. It's Facebook and Instagram has been very popular, and so it'd be fun if you could get on there. Check us out. We also have a group that does law enforcement. We call that branch the Visitor and Resource Protection Branch, and they're the folks you see in the cars with the light bars and walking around with their guns and things like that. I'm a few of those guys. We also have a number of people in administration. We have an administrative officer who manages a couple of folks. They do all the procurement for us. As you can imagine, we have a $5.5 million budget, and we have to go through lots of things like toilet paper and pens and paper and all that stuff. So those guys are in charge of all of that. Make sure our contracts get out the door and on. Randy and I have talked a little bit about what this organization is going to look like for us and what will the park look like, and we've agreed that when we are working, we need to make sure that the field positions are in place first. We've been struggling for a long time in the park. I just read a State of the Park report from 2008, and we've had 72 employees in the park in 2008. That's not even 10 years ago, and we have 48 now. So just when you watch what's going on in the news and you're following things like sequestration, and you go, well, it doesn't matter to me. Well, it does really kind of matter to all of us. So that's what's been happening to us. And I think it's just interesting. So what we're going to be looking at is trying to make sure that those bottom levels are filled. We have lifeguards out on Trunk Bay Beach. They always struggle keeping enough lifeguards. We have, and it's a thin margin down there. So we'll make sure that those positions are taken care of first. And then we'll work our way up the organization side.
How many vacancies do you have now?
Right now we have, the commission is built to fill 7 positions. They're advertised, some of them have been advertised and some of them are not yet.
What kind of positions? So we're going to open it up for questions now. If you have questions, we're going to move from one end to the other, and then if after that happens, if there are others who would like, please, if you would, take names of people as we see them, so that we can make sure that everybody has an opportunity. Okay? And Kaisa, if you would just direct people when they're yes. Can you start, please?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lorelei Monsanto. I'm a member of the Virgin Islands Unity Day Group. Delegate Plaskett, I'll give you the opportunity to thank you for having this, because you have galvanized us into a new movement. So I applaud you for getting me where I am today. We presented a group of questions to Mr. Lassiter at our last meeting, and we would like answers to those questions. The person, Ms. Schaefer, was here during that meeting. She also heard those questions, and I would love for them, or for her, to answer those questions directly. Would you like me to refresh your memory?
Yeah, specifically, there were quite a number. And I'm going to move closer because I don't hear it really great. So
Is everyone hearing me?
I don't know, do you need this microphone?
Okay. The first question was, in reference to, since you were here, your hiring practices in the park. You have, on several occasions, brought people in from the United States or from wherever they're from, and the people who are here are constantly training those individuals, and they are not getting promoted. Why?
Well, I can tell you a little bit about hiring in the park. First off, we hire underneath a whole level of civil service hiring authorities, and I don't think anybody wants to, so we always try to follow those rules as much as we can. In some cases, it means that we end up bringing in what we think is the best person from wherever they might be. What we have been doing to try to reach locals more is to use what's called the Veterans Recruitment Authority. And in the past, about 3 years now, we've brought on 5 different people with that authority, and they're in all different levels of hiring and within the organization. So that's been really successful. That's one way where we can reach out. If someone's not already a federal employee, we can get them that way. If we're going out to anybody who's not a federal employee already, what happens with all the laws that we have in place to protect veterans and help them get jobs when they come back from military service, they are on the top of the list and we can't reach down and pass them.
Excuse me.
That doesn't mean that they wouldn't be good
Not to
employees.
cut you off.
Okay, yeah.
Per
go
the
ahead.
U.S. Code of 1978, and the delegate just briefly spoke about that herself, there is a mandate that you are supposed to look within the Virgin Islands to fill these positions. What have you done? What
There's-
examples, excuse me, let me finish.
Sorry.
What examples do you have that you can give to me this evening where you have attempted to hire locally?
First off, the language is in the law that created the park, 1962, and it says that we will do our best to hire residents of the Virgin Islands. It doesn't actually break us out of the civil service hiring rules. I've gone to our regional office. For the past 3 years, I've asked multiple times, is there a way we can get a
You're not
local
answering my
hiring
question.
authority? I'm going to. I'm just giving you some
You
background.
need to get to it.
I'm just getting to the background.
Okay.
So I've asked, can I get some local hiring authority here? Because that would be really helpful. And my answer has been a resounding no. Now, that's where we go out to the
Okay,
veterans
Schaefer,
recruitment, and
excuse
I've
me.
hired 5 people.
I don't mean to cut you off,
Locals.
but you just answered a question. So Stacy, could I have her bosses answer
Yes.
to that, please?
Yeah, because it's my understanding that, I think what you have been asking is, what have been your local activities to try and identify those individuals? Because you do have the authority to hire the people locally outside of the system. Randy or Stan?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, there's a legal authority to do that. But absent the legal authority, it's our responsibility. I mean, it is incumbent upon us to hire locals, regardless of an authority or not.
But what are you doing
But
to
we
do
do
that?
have that authority, and we're not taking advantage of that authority. It needs to start. And that's one of the things that I'll be making sure through this community engagement. I mean, since I have been here, I have met so many bright young people. One I just met earlier today. Where is she? Raven? Is she? Oh, there. I mean, look at the brilliance that are coming out of the Virgin Islands. It's just undeniable. And why aren't we bringing them into the National Park Service? It needs to happen. That's just not talk. That will happen. So there is a hiring authority. We will start taking advantage of that hiring authority.
When?
When?
Wait.
Back that up?
Wait.
Can you back him up?
Yes.
You're gonna back him up on that statement?
Well, yes, because Joel has done that over.
It's happened.
There has been local hiring authority in some divisions, not all, but some. That's why I'm here, and that's what we're trying to do.
Okay, Stacy, will you continue?
Okay.
Yes, and you had other questions, right?
Yes, we had a series of questions. And
Right.
since she does not remember them, I'm going to take the opportunity to bring them back to her recollection, if you
Very
don't
good.
mind.
Mhm.
Okay. So there was also another question. I am dressed today for heritage and cultural to let you know that we exist. We live here. We're an intricate part of this community, and nobody. No, trust me, I have been an advocate against the park because of things that they do. And I have not seen you reaching out to me. I don't know about everybody else have to speak for themselves. But I haven't seen you have a meeting in reference to this community. I haven't seen a meeting in reference to even the local police department so that they can know what memorandum of understanding. We also need to know what they are. The police need to know what guidelines they have because the roads that go through the park belong to the people of the Virgin Islands and not the national park.
Agreed.
So we clearly have those issues. Can you speak on that, ma'am?
Is there a question?
Yes, the question is, you have currently been giving out, your rangers have been giving out a series of tickets as it pertains to the North Shore Road. We are inviting guests to the park, and we are ticketing them and residents of the Virgin Islands if they go to a funeral and they park on the side of the road. The gentleman just lost his wife. He gets a ticket and he's being harassed. Is there going to be some type of intervention now, since we're on a new tier, with you training your rangers how to talk to people?
So one thing that I'll mention, Randy came from law enforcement, and we were able to keep that law enforcement commission. Lots of times we have to get special permission when you become a superintendent. So I was able to make sure that he kept that law enforcement commission, so he has legal law authority through the National Park Service. So I think moving forward, what he has done, the reason why Randy moved into this position in San Juan was because of same issues with the local community. And he's already started working with the governor of Puerto Rico and the local congresswoman there. He's already started local community policing with the rangers working together, and also an MOU needs to be agreement so people get to know each other. So what would you add to that?
Yeah, I mean, that's the very core of any successful law enforcement organization, regardless of where you are. That's cross cooperation, and you're exactly right. An MOU has to exist, and maybe she could hit on if it does or it doesn't. I couldn't say that for sure. Additionally, we have to do cross training as much and often as possible with our locals, so that they could see our skill sets and we could share their skill sets. It's the core. I mean, that's how we get work done. And absent that, again, is another failure for our future. So, I mean, you hit it on the head. We need to have that cooperation.
Excuse me, but what I think what we're requesting is, what is the sensitivity to access of the local community through the park? As an example that you gave, in Puerto Rico, in the San Juan Park, would someone who parked next to that during a funeral receive a ticket? Well, how do you manage those kinds of things?
There's officer discretion. Every officer has the decision to write a ticket or not to write a ticket. And that's the core of hiring that right person. I can't speak on behalf of that person, but I can tell you, as a human being, I would never write such a citation. And if that did exist, again, that goes back to ensuring that we're bringing the right people on board, that we're mentoring the right young people into those positions that enforce laws empathetically and thoughtfully, not just because it says it's a red line and you just arbitrarily write a ticket. I mean, it's the core of law enforcement, and yeah, we have to do things better. If that happened, I couldn't speak exactly for that, but those are the training things that we need to make sure that we're fixing.
The other thing, Randy, we're going to be implementing across the Park Service is civility. Can't hear?
There's a mic right there.
The other thing we're going to be doing is civility training and also cultural diversity training. So people understand that, you know, when these people come in who may not understand those type of things, we're going to try to make sure that that training is done with that selected who comes in. Because it's not only here. I worked in southern Utah, and it was a very Mormon, and they have a tradition that they come back every year because that's the way they came back to Salt Lake City. And some of our rangers didn't understand that, but it's a tradition, and we were giving them tickets, and I didn't know about it, and then I heard about it. I'm like, are you don't understand? This is something they do every year. It's a migration. And similar here, a funeral. I mean, it's got to be some sensitivity training, and as those things happen, we will change that dynamic. But we need to hear about it. Randy needs to hear about it and make it happen.
Excuse me, Jane, if you could respond, is there an MOU or not?
There is an MOU. I'm not certain if it's been signed yet. I know that Rick Duplin, our chief ranger, was working with the IP to put that in place.
When was that written?
What's that?
When was that written? Because the last I checked, there was none.
There's a draft. I don't know if it's been put into signature yet, but there has been movement on trying to get an MOU in place with
Can we
the
make
IP.
that public?
What's that?
Can that be made public so
Sure.
that we know what's in it?
Sure.
Excuse me, we gotta keep with Ms. Monsanto.
I'm going to ask two more, then I hope other people who were here will follow up with the other existing questions. The Friends of the Park seems to be very influential in what happens in our national park. I would like to know why Eastern National was removed from in front of the office and replaced by the Friends of the Park.
Because, well, Eastern National was removed for both the Park Service's desire as well as Eastern National's desire. They were having a really hard time keeping the store staffed, and just they were managing it out of Puerto Rico and were struggling. They weren't selling much inventory. If you were in the store at all, you could the shelves were often empty. They were just struggling really hard. So we asked the Friends of the Park if because they've been successful in their Mongoose Junction store, would they be willing to go through a paperwork process to become what we call our cooperating association in the store. And they have taken it up and are doing a beautiful job. And their sales and stuff to buy, and it's interesting, and people are really liking it.
Sam?
And that has happened across the country in some other areas.
The question is there a bidding process? Since Eastern National removed themselves, as you're stating, from that office, was there a bidding process so somebody who locally owns a bookstore or wanting to start a business could have been given that opportunity? Why would it?
Well, usually it was an agreement because they already had a relationship and
You have a relationship with me too. I live here.
I know.
You got the parking cost of my 4 partners, so you have a relationship with me too.
Yes.
going to have a management change and a management style change. In the 3 years that Ms. Schaefer has been here, the people of the Virgin Islands, the residents, the local residents, not the friends of the park or the specialty people, have not seen her. How is she going to change her management style and become this new individual overnight? You don't know. When was the last time you were here?
I wasn't, the only thing I've been to is when I requested that Brian, I had a tour of the parks, where I had discussions with him about some of the issues that the people had expressed to me, and I've had town halls where you have come to the town hall, not in your capacity as a parks person, but as Jane Schaefer. But other than that, I have not been invited to or know of any open houses.
We have not held any open houses where the park has said, come on in except for one since I've been here. But otherwise, like this kind of format, we don't have.
And there'll be more in the future. As I said, let's move forward. Open houses are common in communities where there are parks, and it is a discretion of the superintendent. So, Randy and Jane will make those start happening now, and I think that we're hearing it, that's what you want. And we have to have it if we need community engagement, so we can know what you're thinking, so we can work together. So let's say moving forward, we'll have these type of dialogues, and Randy and Jane will get it on a calendar. When I've been a superintendent in Yosemite, we had open houses to the community, but we had it on the calendar. But every 3 months there was one, and whoever wanted to come and we would have it in the morning and in the evening, so people who work will be able to do it. So I've done it in other parks, and it could be done here.
One question before we go to the next person. When you talked about, Ms. Monsanto talked about management style and being superintendent of the park, I know that you stated that Ms. Schaefer was the acting superintendent. What is the process for there being a permanent superintendent? And what is the availability? Will that become an open position that others will be able to apply for? And how will the enacting law, the enabling law that discusses local hires be affected in that hiring of a permanent superintendent on St. John?
Well, as I explained, with the realignment, Jane is fulfilling that Brian position. So we have 3 superintendents, St. Croix, San Juan, and St. John, and Jane's, she's no longer acting, that title's gone away. She's now the superintendent of the park, and Randy's the superintendent for Caribbean parks. Now, if Jane or Randy were to go, this position would become vacant, and then I would be looking at local hiring authority, maybe do Sill Stones or whatever, and the same with Randy. Like I said earlier, if Randy was to move on, we would have 2 positions open, and 15, this Caribbean park superintendent could be in any place. But the St. John position would only be in St. John, and it'll be the superintendent of this park, and she will have, right now it's Jane, and nothing's going to change. So as far as, decision making, it's my responsibility to make sure that we are meeting your goals and objectives.
I guess I may not have been clear because when Brian left, I didn't know that that position then immediately became filled by the person who was directly below him. Is that, and I believe that's what Ms. Schaefer's position was?
Right.
Is that how that works? That if a superintendent position becomes vacant, then the person below takes that? Or is there an open vacancy announcement? How does that happen?
In this particular case, it was just a lateral, because the position was already vacant. We can get into the numbers, but what's happening there is because Randy was the superintendent at San Juan, and then he moved into the Caribbean Park. So there's only 115. 15 is the level. 115 for the Caribbean Park superintendent.
I guess I'm just trying to understand how Jane became an acting to becoming the permanent superintendent.
Because she was the deputy.
Okay, so that's how it occurs in most parks?
Yes, in most parts. Like right now, I'm going to be headed up to do 2 more of these realignments discussions, and usually there's vacancies. So like in our North Carolina park, currently the Cape Lookout superintendent is vacant. So that way when we do the realignment, that position will be open. So if this position happens to become vacant, then it'll be an opening position.
So in Puerto Rico, there's a vacancy now for the superintendent.
Right.
Does the deputy in Puerto Rico then become the superintendent?
There was no deputy at the time.
So if I could hit, there was a GS-15 in Brian's spot. That position became vacant. She was already the sitting deputy at the 14. The 15 went away completely, went back into their budget, and that's the discussion we need to have. That money should go back to people who are actually on the ground working in the parks. So that money isn't going to go to a Caribbean superintendent or anything. It stays here to hire more people to do more things in the park. So that money stays in this park. How I was funded is I was already a sitting 15. Basically, San Juan lost that funding and now is overseeing the Caribbean. So if anybody lost funding, it was San Juan, not the Virgin Islands.
And that'll be some time before we can fill the deputy. So he's kind of using some of his division chiefs to fill that gap right now.
Right. Yep.
And we have to get approval through Washington for any position that's above a GS-12 right now.
Do we have a listing of the vacancies that are on St. John, or if there are any in St. Croix? And where can people go to see those vacancies?
There are, like James said, there's about 7 here, and it's probably about 5 or 6 over in St. Croix.
So are they on the website? Are they on a board at the St. John Park? How can people know what those positions are?
And that's up to
They haven't been advertised yet, but they'll be on a website. It's called www.usajobs.gov, and they go on there and you can select where you want to look, and they'll be popping up there.
Why not
We'll
go
also
beyond that?
advertise when we have some positions and we get to the point of having them be real. Right now, they're just hopes that they'll get through the HR process, but once they do, we put them in the newspaper. We don't, and probably put them up on trade winds. Well, it's always a paperwork process first, right? We haven't advertised the position. We haven't advertised.
So when it goes on USA Jobs,
We'll get it out
will
on-
it also go into the Daily News,
Yes, it
onto the Source, into the local papers as well, so that people can see that?
Right, the Daily News, probably trade winds.
Has that
There's
happened
no
in the past?
trade winds.
So you're right, it has not happened in the past. It hasn't happened in the past. And the one thing, the problem that I find, whether it's San Juan or here or St. Croix, a lot of people don't understand how to go into USA Jobs. We have people in Atlanta, it's very complicated. So what Jane can do, and I'll recommend that, is to post it on, locally in the paper. Even when I was working out in Yosemite, it's kind of isolated out there. We would put it on the radio. Here, these are some of the positions that are going to be opening. So there's different ways to get that communication out, and we can really look into that now.
The delegate has given me a one-year follow-up. This young lady just said the trade winds, they have been defunct for years. So what type of connection does she have with us? Okay, this is a problem, and I no offense to you, young lady. However, I am fighting for my own people's survival. I am fighting for my kids to come back and enjoy this park because their forefathers, they went through a lot to give people land for a park. Some of them were scammed, whatever. We all know the story. So here we are today. We are starting a new beginning. We're not going back. You had 60 years of freedom. Free paper bond. Okay? If we are going to uphold the mandate, we are reaching out to the local populace. We have young kids who just graduated from high school. We have kids who graduated from college. We had over 700 students in UVI on 2 islands. Where are they going to work? The national park. Hopefully. Where are these kids? What future are we providing for them? What are the avenues? Okay? So these are the questions that I want answers to. And being that she is disconnected, in my opinion, and I can only speak for myself, I find a problem with that. Thank you for your time.
So just before you start, we're going to try to limit everyone to 3 minutes so we can get everyone an opportunity that needs to ask a question. So we'll start with you, then we'll go at you and try to get towards the end.
Does
Thank you.
anybody here have any appointments other than this tonight? I think we can take more than 60 minutes. The last vote is 11 o'clock. Be that as it may. I am a senior citizen, okay? And I know the history of the park. This situation with employment has been going on since the inception, 1956. I remember clearly Mr. Edmund Roberts, and I'm just so sorry he is not on island. Mr. Edmund Roberts was promised that he needed experience, so they would send him to the mainland to get park experience. Edmund Roberts, I think, worked for the park for how many years? At least 30? It's got to be. He's been in almost every park in the United States, including Alaska. And they have never found the opportunity to send him back here. I'm just so sorry he's not here tonight. But number two, discretion, Mr. Randy, what you said, discretion, that is the beginning, the middle, and the end. If I am in charge of anything, and I'm coming into a situation, and especially a community that is different from the one I come from, I want to know the people, I want to get to know them, I want to understand the culture, etc., etc. And the park is supposed to be a benefit to us. It's not. I would want, no matter what you all say, all due respect, if you want to hire locals, you will find a way to hire locals. Yes. It's as simple as that. If you want to hire locals, you will find a way to hire locals. This is what we call the party line here. This has been going on since 1956. And year in, year out, it's the same thing. Discretion. I was one of the people when Miss Kyle, she was an officer here, police officer, died. We had a memorial at Hawks Nest for her. And this park ranger came up to me and told me he was going to give me a ticket because I was on the road. My tires were not on the road. They were off the road. I went to fight it, but of course I didn't win. I had to pay. Discretion. I am 6:30 in the morning, I'm in East End fishing. Anybody who's born and raised in St. John is accustomed to fishing around the points, etc., etc. Out of the clear blue, 6:45, a ranger appeared on the rocks. I'm on the boat, and he's telling me I can't fish here.
He was
because this is called the monuments. When Mr. Hargrove was here, I constantly was behind him. I said, you're trying to make criminals of us. I said, we don't know anything about monuments. You have to label the monuments. You have to label the monuments. You have to label the monuments. And I think what is wrong here is the attitude of the park. The park is federal, and the people who work for the park, they have no connection to the community. There's no affinity, nothing. They just come and they take what the mandate is for the park, but no consideration to us. The park has more than 2/3 of the Virgin of St. John now. I understand from our last meeting, we only have 5 square miles. Our taxes are exorbitant, our property taxes. The Friends of the Park are millions or hundreds of thousands of people other than on St. John. They have their own agenda. It does not include us. If you examine the roster of the Friends of the Park, I would doubt seriously if you find 50 local people on that. They have a whole other agenda. And anybody who can make $100 and something thousand managing the Friends of the Park has got to be doing something good for themselves, not for us. So all I am saying is, no matter what the regulations are, no matter what the procedures are, anyone who comes into this environment in the Virgin Islands has to be a people person. They have to be culturally adept. And they just have to want to incorporate who's here in the process. It's not complicated. We are making it more complicated than it needs to be. We really are. I am sure that in Puerto Rico, this does not exist. Because Puerto Ricans are very cultural conscious and they do not allow people to come in and take over.
I'll hit just a little bit since you mentioned Puerto Rico. I mean, the foundation is there. I mean, it's a Caribbean island just like anywhere. We have just over 100 employees at the San Juan National Historic Site. 99.9% Puerto Rican. There is a mechanism. What needs to happen is the commitment. That's what needs to happen. Right? So.
And And how did you make that, how is that possible?
I wish I could take credit for that, but I have to get. I wish I could have a drum to beat that. But my predecessor and his predecessor was committed to ensuring Puerto Ricans had jobs, and so. They left a great legacy for me, and I believe in that legacy, and we'll be continuing that legacy.
Excuse me, just let me say one more thing, and I'll be through for the day. What is your name, sir?
Stan.
Stan?
Stan.
Okay. Part of the problem that most people don't understand is we have adversarial relationship with the park from the inception.
That's right.
Because the intention of Rockefeller and Mr. Sticks was to put us off the island. Off the island. They were going to condemn St. John without any representation. And when we rose up about that, then they decided maybe they'll put us in Fish Bay or some other bay. But a gentleman came back from the service and he fought this condemnation act in Congress. You understand me? So listen, you didn't put us off the island, but what's happening now, every time the land trust buys property, they turn it over to the park. So eventually, in another 100 years, we'll be non-existent practically. So you must understand our anxiety about this.
That's right.
Okay? And we are peaceful people until we are pushed to the brink. And unfortunately, power does not concede without some kind of revolution. But I wouldn't want to see that. I wouldn't want to see that. And one more thing, you said that the population that comes here, tourism, is up. But another thing, when I was growing up here, and eventually vehicles became available and we can traverse the park, we were able to see the water line. Now you drive through the park and all the trees are just covering everything. You can't see the ocean, you can't see the other islands. You know, it's like you can't cut anything here. You know, you have to be practical too. You know, if it's a tourist stop, then destination, then you have to make it, you know, inviting and attractive for tourists. You can't be driving on the Kasha. Kasha is ripping your arm off, and you know, you gotta prune the trees so people can see the ocean and enjoy the scenery. Thank you. I'm through.
Anybody in the room actually doesn't know, this is Miss Theodora Moorhead, and she is actually Mr. Theobald Moorhead's daughter. And so for those of us on St. John, this is actually an intergenerational struggle. And before I go into my question, I'll actually start with a quote from Mr. Moorhead that Ms. Moorhead blessed me with this afternoon by offering me one of his papers. In regards to, often we're told that tourism has increased as a result of the presence of the park on island. But essentially one of the things that Mr. Moorhead penned is that no amount of money spent on St. John can make up to us for the threatened loss of our rights as citizens. And so, as I'm Hadia Soor-Gibney, I am a PhD candidate in the Africana Studies Department at Brown University, but I'm also one of them young St. Johnians who can trace her ancestry on St. John back to the 1700s. One of the things that I care about is the fact that we do not have a public high school on island. And I feel a bit like a broken record because I posed this question the last time we were all sitting here. However, that trip to St. Thomas is actually an arduous one. The time that we spend on the journey and waiting to catch the ferry is time that we don't have to do our homework, to study, to take up a part-time job, to prepare for the SATs or any other kind of career planning. And so it's actually really important for young St. Johnians to have a public high school on island. And this has actually been a struggle for quite a while. The One Campus group that many of the individuals who are here today, like Lorelai Monsanto, Mr. Alvis Christian, Ms. Kristen Cox, and others whom I don't see, really trying to push Donna Christensen to propose a bill to essentially provide land that was identified in Catherineburg for the establishment of a school, passed in the House, failed in the Senate, in part because some of the wealthier landowners in the area lobbied against the establishment of a school in their neighborhood. Now, if we're talking about a realignment or restructuring that's taking place on St. John, I really do hope that we can resurrect the discussion about donating land for the establishment of a school. And I'm, saying donating rather than exchange, because I think it's important to note that the park occupies over 2/3 of this island, and more than 75%. And so there really is no reason for our government to spend money that it does not have for the establishment of a school. So I'm hoping that you all can speak about what you are prepared to do to make a donation for the establishment of a K-12 public school on St. John possible.
So as we know, we've already determined where that piece of property is, and the park is prepared to transition that land to the territory. And at this stage of the game, we aren't allowed to just donate it back. So it's the legal part of this that we can't as a service can. So what we would need is something else to be able to help us do that. And we can't, at this stage of the game, that's not something that we're allowed to do. I can't give land that belongs to the people of the United States to anybody. I don't think in Yellowstone they can't do it for people of Wyoming. But it doesn't mean that we don't agree with you. It doesn't mean that we wouldn't like to see it happen. It means that we're waiting until the territory comes forward, we're waiting until we get authority to do something else.
So with regard to that, the legality is that it can be done through enabling legislation. I have not done it because I know that the Governor Mathis said he's been in discussion with the national parks and with Interior with regard
So also clearly stated that he does not believe that a school may be necessary on St. John, and he also feels like perhaps we shouldn't quibble with the park, and instead we should purchase the land. However, we all know that our government doesn't necessarily have the funds to do so. So if legislation is possible, because legislation has been on the table before, where are you all in being able to say that you are ready and willing and able to pass that legislation?
Well,
so that
I'm ready to offer the legislation. Passing anything in this House is a very different matter. This House is not, meaning the House of Representatives, is not giving anything that has a dollar figure to it. Everything is being absolutely cut at this point. And to enable the park to give land would have a dollar attachment of value to it. And the individuals who control this Congress are not interested in giving anything that has a dollar value away at this point.
So how is this particular situation changed by the fact that the 10 acres in Katzenberg had a specific clause in it that allowed the land not only to be donated to the park, but to be offered up for the greater good of the people of St. John?
That clause allows it to be in consideration. But as I said, each Congress will interpret it differently. The reason that Donna Christensen was able to offer the amendment and it passed the House was how the House was controlled at that time. The House is no longer controlled by that party, which means that it will have much more difficulty to be passed in this Congress. So what often happens right now in terms of most legislation is that you offer it, you have hearings on it, you continue to gather co-sponsors and others who are supportive of it, so that at another time it can then be offered and actually be put forward. But, yeah, go ahead.
One of the things that we also know is that many of the people who lived in the area at the time and lobbied against the establishment of the school are actually no longer here. And so while I understand that this particular House may not be amenable to passing the legislation, can we still put it on the table in hopes that if there is no one here actually advocating against it, that it may possibly go through?
That's a great idea.
Go ahead. Wilma Marsh Monsanto, and everyone here knows me as an advocate.
Talk a little bit louder so they can hear you.
I'm Wilma Monsanto, and
There are
have-
mics here if you.
That would be nice because I've been using my voice all day. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you.
It doesn't go that far. Okay? You got to sit here.
Good evening, folks.
Okay, this one is on. Here you go. You have to come to right here. Is this? It's not on. Okay.
Go ahead.
Good evening, one and all. Oh, well, we're on the move. Everyone who spoke here tonight, I really appreciated them being so honest and open with you. And whatever they have said, trust me, I can stand behind it. I'm very concerned what I'm hearing now about the school situation because the former administration had the Young and Associates firm to do the schematic for the school. All of that was done. Where has that gone? Because right now, as we stand here tonight, the governor map is talking to someone about buying 10 acres of land in Chocolate Hole to build a public school. Mr. President, keep your eye on that, please, because the only thing that's pending, I heard the discussion, the seller of the land was on the radio, he announced it, and he said the only thing that's standing in the way now is the money to buy 10 acres of land in Chocolate Hole. What happened to I understood it was 40, 50 acres in Katerinburg. What happened to those lands? They said that the thing is that the park was looking for an exchange because that is the policy of the park, that they don't give unless you can give them. Is that true, sir?
Well, I think what Jane was saying, that we can't give land, but we can exchange it, and it can happen a lot faster through the policy. So, correct. I didn't know.
That's exactly what I meant to.
Right. So we can, back to your question, this is happening across the country in many parts. People want to donate, and we can't accept it because because of the value. And as the Congressman was saying to you, this particular Congress right now will not approve a loss of revenue to the federal government. But if we can do an exchange and work with the Congresswoman and the Governor, we can make that happen a lot faster. And I don't know these areas you're talking about, but these two lots.
Yeah, I don't know if I really need this. The property is still waiting there. We've already, the Katerinburg property. And yes, I sat through those meetings as well as we were going through and showing us the schematics. And
We have a schematic.
so those are, I'm not certain that the park actually has them, but the territory I know does. And so they've done some work, they've done surveys, they've done archaeological surveys, they've done cultural work. So that now it's just waiting until either lands are available to exchange to us, legislation gets passed, something like that.
I think you need to put it in writing to the people of Virgin Islands because what I have understood is that St. Croix is saying, no way, Jose. You don't get any land from them, they're not giving up anything. Who has authority here? If it's federal properties and you have the authority, I think you should take the stand. You know, you don't have people dictating that they don't want because they're not given anything so that St. John could get something. It's too much of a friction between islands, and you need to take a stand and make sure that what is being done to the best for everyone involved, particularly the young people. Quick light. The park owns 75% of the lands on St. John. We have some terrible boundary disputes. And some people have even been arrested as trespassing on lands. We have destroyed those individuals' whole life because they were arrested by the rangers and whatnot, and it became very problematic. But the matter of bounds, and some folks are sitting here today and they can tell you that it's just not right what is happening in our island. I personally thank God for the wisdom. Many years ago, took the national park to court, and because they had overstepped their bounds, they had claimed several acres of land. There's still over 300 acres of land in the Reef section that belongs to the family. If you go to the cadastral office, you will find that it's marked off there, but what fools the mortals be, if you know it's yours and you don't go after it, the park just circles it, and it's sitting right there. Now, and I think advantage is taken of us because it costs a lot of money to get involved in a lawsuit against the park. I remember they sent down a lawyer from Washington, D.C. Folks, bear with me. They sent down an attorney from Washington, D.C. to go over this matter when I first brought it up. And he was a little obnoxious, and he showed me a deed. And I said, you were deeded 600 acres. How do you have a map here showing that you own 900 acres? He couldn't answer me. And the meeting adjourned, never to be heard of again. So I had to take the matter to court and thank God. They were trying to use, again, statute of limitation is a big thing in this island. Our court system is not in favor of us being progressive people in these islands. Because the matter of adverse possession, I mean, these are many, many years. The generation that come and the other one comes and they realize that there's a problem and you want to challenge it. To use the statute of limitation is ridiculous. I had to go to Washington, D.C. and ask the congressional representative to look into that, and it was therefore waived, the statute of limitation, thereby allowing me to bring the case. I was going to bring that newspaper tonight. Nothing happened in the Virgin Islands, no explanation. The USA Today carried a big story. Virgin Island family won their properties back with my name and everything in there. I'm not bragging on myself, but I give God praise for the wisdom to be able to challenge the federal government when it comes to the matter of land. We have a major problem here where lands are being claimed. Roadway, we can't get our properties because the roadways, the trees, again, like the lady said, trees are going in the way. Particularly down in exactly, Honest France, down in West France. That's a problem because we own 200 and something acres in there. I don't see the tax bill coming forward, but I know it's in the adjudication. We go to our senators to try to help us. We get no place. We come to the federal government, we get no place. What do we do? I'm sort of with Miss Lady Mom over here, Miss Theodora. Eventually something will happen because the next generation may not take it as lightly as we are taking it. You know, and we have to correct ourselves. We have to want honesty and integrity. We need leaders who would look out for our people. Right now I see leaders, I'm not casting any because I don't know any aspersion here. I pray to God that we would find some honesty and integrity, a willingness to do for our people. You look just like my brother-in-law. You look just like, that's a way. That's a way. So, but we really need some help. You know, every day I'm on the radio because we have a cadastral system here that should be closed down.
Don't stop.
You know, we really have a major problem with maps and maps of burnt and things like that. We need to establish your boundaries. You need to let us know it's not ours, so that Another thing, and the last thing, we need your help when it comes to properties. We need your help because the local government, our government, the property taxes are much higher than St. Thomas or St. Croix, just because we happen to be in the park. And we suffer the consequences because we cannot afford to pay these exorbitant prices. We need you to look into that for us and find out where we can get some relief. There is the Senate President. Okay, there he is. I want you to share with us tonight whether or not it is feasible that you can help us to come into some sort of understanding or working with our local government as to how they can actually help us to survive and hold on to the little bit that we have within the park. May God bless us all. And thank you so much.
I'm just asking everyone to get straight to the question, because I know my people over here are getting very upset that they're not getting ready to ask their questions. But I'll get straight to the question. so we can get everybody an opportunity. Go ahead.
Hi, good evening. My question was really in reference to Hadia's question. In reference to where is the Parks for Land Trust and the Friends Group in the way of raising funds to possibly purchase the land and save a lot of this angst amongst the people about getting a high school? Have they ever been tried to go through them to help assist in the process? I mean, there are groups that are for the people of the Virgin Islands, St. John in particular. What is their thoughts on helping? Have anybody asked them?
The two groups you said are
Parks for land, for National Park for Trust or something like that. And Friends, I don't remember the exact name.
Yeah, they just donated land that could have been considered a swap.
That could have been a transfer.
That could have been a swap to the person necessary for us to do.
When was that land donated?
Last year.
So were the deeds, has the deeds been completed on that?
All over.
Maybe I can clarify that, both of those things. Good evening, everyone. I'm Joe Kessler, President of Friends of the Park. Yeah, you know me. Contrary, perhaps, to popular belief, the Friends has been very supportive and very active on the whole school, the land for school issue. I personally interacted with Secretary Kempthorne, who was the Secretary of the Interior in the final stages of the Bush administration, and brought the whole land issue to him, encouraging him to see what he could do to move it forward. He then visited the Virgin Islands about 3 months later, and at that time, the Department of the Interior gave the Virgin Islands government $250,000 to do some of the studies that Jane mentioned. Several years later, Secretary Salazar, during his administration of Interior, he provided another $125,000 for additional studies that needed to be done. Everything's been rested. Everything, the park has really done everything they can do. They've identified the property. They've outlined what needed to be done for the property to be exchanged. And I understand that people don't like the idea of an exchange. I mean, I totally understand it. The only thing is that under current legislation, that's the only alternative.
So what about the suggestion that was just made that rather than donating land to the park, at the next ability that a large group has land, to instead of donating it to the park for parkland, donating it as the land for the swap?
Well, the Friends actually, during Governor DeYoung's term, offered to donate 4 acres of land that we own to use to contribute towards that swap. Mm-hmm. He was working on deals on St. Croix to swap the land there for here and so on. We made the offer. The offer is still standing. Governor Mapp has said from the beginning that he doesn't want to swap parkland, that the government has land to use. Tonight we're hearing that he's planning to buy land in Chocolate Hole or somewhere. But that's that's where the current situation is. We've done, we put our money where our mouth is, and offered 4 acres towards that swap. The land is in Stephen Molyneux along the Los Barons track, that we purchased a number of years ago in a tax sale.
Well, I'll contact you. Because that would be, if you have the legislation, that would be, easier to utilize for a discussion with the House leadership and with the parks, and I'll approach the governor about that.
It really rests with the governor's office. It's rested with the governor's office for 6 years now.
Right.
And they're really that's really where the inaction has been, both with the young and now with Matt.
The issue becomes after the swap, then the funding to build.
Well, the funding to build, maintain, staff, everything else, and that's all on certainly local government's plate. It really has nothing to do with the Park Service. I mean, the Park Service has, in I believe it was 2001 or 2002, because this issue's been around for a very long time, right? From the day I arrived, and maybe Lorelei, who first brought it up to me. At that time, there was no option. You know, Park Service just doesn't give land, doesn't sell park land. And in 2001, the Cherokee Nation in North Carolina worked out a deal with the Park Service to swap some land in Great Smokies National Park for some property they owned along the Blue Ridge Parkway, also a national park, so that they could join get the land between two communities, the two communities could be joined back together.
Mr. President, is that land you're talking about private land that you have?
Yes, it's owned by the Friends.
Why would you depend on the governor to decide whether or not you're going to swap this land to the federal government?
Well, because the swap is not with me. The swap is between the territorial government and the Park Service. We would donate the land to the territorial government to use as part of their swap.
So, thanks for raising that. Thank you for the additional information. Let's move to the next one, but what I just had a discussion with Mr. Austin about was examples of schools in parks in other parts of the country, such as Yosemite, you say, Grand Canyon, Golden Gate. So creating, asking a working group to get together that include St. Johnians within that working group, because it would be their school, to have that discussion with you, with the governor's office and our office, to see how some agreement can be made. Okay? So can we have the next one?
Yes. Good afternoon. My name is Pam Gaffin, and I had sent you my list of questions to remind you, so maybe you could do your homework. So I will bring it up. Act number 806, signed and enacted in 1962, states that the VI has accepted the offer of the National Park Service to maintain and improve 5 public roads on St. John. The park has done so for 3 of those roads, but have ignored the other 2. It also very clearly states that you do not own the roads, which means that your cops cannot give tickets on roads that they do not own, because they are VI roads, not your roads. But what I would like to know is, when are you going to maintain all the ones that you have not done for all these years? Because I figure that you owe us a whole bunch of paving. I have the act, it's here, it's signed by the National Park. That's question number 1. Question number 2. Bill number 714, which was passed by Congress concerning the lease between the National Park Service and Camille, states that the rental amount charged to Camille will be paid directly to the National Park. I would like to see the lease and know how much Camille is paying every year. Do you have any idea what that amount would be?
I missed the second one. Oh, Camille based, I don't think they pay anything in taxes.
Well, they should, because Bill 714 says that they have to pay, and that means that the money could go to you and improve, and maybe hire locals with that money. Also, it says that Camille cannot change, part of the lease says that Camille can do nothing to change the footprint, period. But they have. Honeymoon Beach, magically, ended up with a concessionaire from St. Thomas with nobody ever getting to say, I want that too. It just happened. And new buildings and bathrooms were built at Honeymoon Beach on parkland, which the lease says they can't do, and the National Park didn't seem to really care if they even got a building permit. And again, part of the whole thing is that Camille cannot interfere at all in park behavior, and yet they have part of the lease.
The other way around, we can't interfere in their behavior.
No, you need to read the lease. You need to read Bill 714, because that's not what it says, okay? What it says is that they can do nothing to disturb the way the park worked before they got the lease. And they have, because right now, we are not allowed to go on the park trail at Camille. And we have to pay $20 to get on there. and they will not let us walk on the trails that are national park trails on Camille. And the last person that was in charge said, Pam, we know that, but why don't you take it to court? Because you could fight it so much better than we could. But of course, all the superintendents that we get have historically been the people that are going to retire in 2 years. And all they care about is getting their pension jacked up to the max and leaving. And we have had that, and I beg you, sir, do not give us any more superintendents for 2 years. We want young superintendents. It is not fair to us. We had one guy that commuted to Florida. That's where his house and family was for 2 years. How insulting is that to us as how much he cares about this park? It has been like that for 20 years. We've had the rejects. We don't want no more rejects. We want first-class people working in our park. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Charles Kinvader. I'm a visitor here. I just came about 25 years ago. I have one thing that I've asked park superintendents back in 2002. I think it was Mr. King you had here as the park superintendent. I started with him. I want to know, where can I go in the national park to see your maps, your deeds? You have put me off of a few places. Oh, you can't go in there. Why? Oh, that belongs to the national park. This is for this reason or that reason. I have had good friends of mine challenged on their own personal property that they owned before the Danish turned it over to the United States, not before the park came. They've been challenged on that property, spending what little money they have to try and defend themselves on land that their grandfather got whipped for. Where are your maps? Where can I walk into your cadastral office and say, this belongs to the park, this belongs to people of the Virgin Islands? That's one thing, just that.
I'll answer that one. You are welcome to come up and go through our archive. We have an archive off of North Shore Road and Lynn Point.
I understand.
Okay, so
I take
you are
the beats out.
welcome to come up there. Now, those are not the official ones.
Well, I want something
They're
that
in
says
Atlanta.
for sure what's official, what's for real.
Yeah, so those are actually elsewhere.
Every piece of land in the United States changes paperwork, changes hands with stamps.
Yeah.
You should have somewhere the deeds to all the property that you claim belongs to you. You should have a...
And we do. We have it in our land trust. We have some here in Naples, Florida, which handles all of the
Okay,
stuff.
and is any of this online?
Probably not, but if you reach out to Randy and Jane, we can connect you to the person that's been in lands for 30 years, and she'll be able to help answer that question.
Okay. I'll be good. Thank you.
That would be nice to add to the National Park website.
Yes, that would be very important. That would show where you can fish, where you can't fish, where you can use a trail or not.
Good night. My name is Judy Schimmel, and I'm a reporter for St.John TradeWindsNews.com. I'm saying that, and I usually don't speak at public meetings, but since a public official made reference to posting job announcements in my publication that I work for, I wanted to make sure that you know that the newspaper exists, it's present, and if that's something that you'd like to do in the future, we have a business office, and I'm sure that we would be glad to work with you. I don't know that that has happened in the past. However, here's my question. I heard Mr. Levasseur refer to his work with the parks down here, and I thought I heard you say that between St. Croix, St. John, and Puerto Rico, you would be dealing with all three parks.
All three parks agreements.
I understand that there are actually 5 parks in the U.S. Virgin Islands. So I was curious about what your duties will be to Buck Island National Monument, St. Croix National Historic Site, Virgin Islands National Park, Hassel Island, and also the Coral Reef Underwater Monument, of which one of the members of this audience said they received the ticket in that particular area, although there's no signage declaring that that's a national park with its officially designated name. So I would like to ask you if you could answer that
Yes,
question.
ma'am. I apologize. I misspoke. When I say St. Croix National Parks, I should have used the S. It's all encompassing. Same with Virgin Islands National Park. So I apologize and thanks for the correction on that. It is all the parks in the Caribbean. So you're correct. I should have emphasized the S.
So, excuse me, Randy, so then can you clarify, Joel Tutine has within, as a superintendent, which are the parks that he is superintendent for?
So he has Christiansted, has Buck Island, has Salt River, and then here we have the Coral Reef and we have the Virgin Islands.
And then who's responsible for Hassel Island, and for those others?
Virgin Islands.
Let him go first.
No.
You go ahead.
No, my question was, what responsibilities do you have as the park group superintendent for those particular sites that were not named? Do you have reporting responsibilities? Do you have plans for signage, which is something that most parks have? Some of those parks don't have. You know, are there areas in there that need particular attention? And I also understand that there's going to be some kind of a realignment plan that you and Ms. Schaefer and Joel Tutine will sit down and develop that you have to turn in to Mr. Austin at a designated period of time. Will the items that I raised be addressed in that? And can you tell us more about that plan?
Let me explain, because I think so. Nothing's going to change for Mr. Tutine. He's still going to be. All right. All right. So, as I said earlier, Mr. Tutine and his group of parks there, nothing's going to change. The only thing about this realignment is that instead of Mr. Tutine calling Atlanta and talking to a deputy that's no longer there, he will call San Juan. But Mr. Tutine will still have day-to-day on all of his parks and monuments. And the same here in the Virgin Islands with the Coral Bay and the Virgin Islands National Park. Jane will have that local authority. Where Randy comes in is the group superintendent will go to Randy in San Juan as the senior person in the group, and then to me. So in a sense...
And excuse me, understand the person who will be in San Juan will also report to Randy.
Right, and the person same in Randy will report to Randy. So that means Randy will have oversight, but it's the exact same thing. The difference is Randy can get here in an hour. Barkley never got here but once in 4 years, the deputy. But he was on the phone a lot, and then it would come to me. So it's just a layer of bureaucracy, to be honest with you, that's going to help local decision maker, and that's where the Secretary of the Interior is trying to look. He did a big announcement in Denver 2 weeks ago where he said, we want decision making at the local level. So Randy, Jane, and Joel will get together. You talk about this 90 days. I just gave them to come into a plan to how they're going to work together more. And what I wanted them to do, how we can share resources. So if Randy has extra money, maybe he could help Jane and Joel with their YCC program. Or imagine if 5 people everyone has computers and printers. So sometimes if only St. Croix is ordering a printer and they all need printers, they're not talking to each other. You get a lot more cost savings if you order 5 printers instead of 1 at a time. So those type of things. Resources for contracts. So say you need a contractor for a big electrical job, and if Randy needs one in San Juan, most of these contractors are coming from San Juan or Florida, and they're ripping us off. Let's be honest, they're coming here, and then because we're not working together, we put our resources together and do one contract, and they can go back and forth. And we're seeing that across, and then you have the low bid, you have these things. And then also making sure that some contracts are local. We want to make sure some of the cleaning services and work things that we contract out have local opportunities first. But if these folks aren't talking and working together, and that wasn't happening, before. Maybe on occasion, I've talked to a few people here in the park, they never even talked to the same counterpart in St. Croix, and we're all one. I heard earlier that there's this little tension between St. Croix and St.John. Maybe it's competitive, but at the park level, we're one family, and we want to start working together, and that's my push to make that happen. So your question is, Nothing's going to change below Joelle, below Jane, or below Randy, except for a phone call, or Randy needs to come down here like he's here now, making a commitment to all of you. From here forward, we're going to have maybe 3 or 4 community meetings. And maybe I can get down here once a year to do this again. I think it's important that the Congresswoman did this, because I'm hearing things that I didn't know, you know? So it's really important.
And on top of the financial and the resource benefits, it's clear to me that I will need to be engaged in the community relations, the employee safety, and the employee satisfaction. I've learned a lot since I've been here, so things have changed in the things that I will be focusing on. And those 3 items will be my top. And who knows, next week I may learn more that I need to get more invested in. So there's going to be a lot more direction and oversight as the Caribbean as a whole.
Will the plan be made public? Will the plan that you develop be made public?
Yes. Not only will it be made, absolutely, we're hoping to have representatives, once it's draft, to have some input.
Absolutely.
It's a dialogue with the Friends group, with the public, with the concessionaires. We have to also remember, we're talking about Camille Bay and the campgrounds. Those folks are really working hard to develop and making sure that our visitors and the public are getting those things that they need. And that's a whole other conversation. We can probably go down.
But you never gave me an answer to my 2 questions, by the way.
Your road question.
Yeah.
Because there is some debate there, and I'll be honest with you. We have had our top lawyers look at some of that rule that and even the Congresswoman and I have had long discussions on that. So I would rather have that discussion with you, with our legal authorities in the room, because there's some real debate on that document that you showed us.
Okay, and what about the lease for Camille? When can we see that?
The lease for Camille, that's been...
It's, the Camille Bay retained use estate that they're under right now expires in 2023. And they have been given by Congress the option to enter into a non-competitive lease for another 40 years. That whoever existing,
They have not been given that.
a law passed by the Congress.
Talking to Mike.
We want to see the lease, whatever the lease.
This is not good.
I want to see the lease, whatever the lease.
Okay, and so that's all in negotiation right now.
No, there is a lease. When am I going to see the lease?
There is not a copy of the new lease yet. They are
The old one. Lease.
The one they're on.
Existing lease.
Okay, you think there's a copy of it?
Okay, good. How do I get that
Stop by
copy?
her office. Go by the office and talk to you.
Actually, Randy can get it to me. He has my email address.
Wait, let him go and then he'll come back to you quick. Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Juan Batiste. I've heard some testimony about some issues that were happening in St. John. Excuse me. It was mentioned the last time that we were here, and I was really of the opinion that you guys would have come prepared to respond to those things that was presented to you before. But let me try to rehash a little bit. I live in Coral Bay. And I'm going to say it as I said it before. If the road at Bordeaux gets closed or gets shut off through whatever the case may be, I cannot get out. The problem with that is that growing up as a kid, we used to use the Reef Bay Trail. There was a road from Coral Bay to Cruz Bay across lands that the park is now saying belong to them. There was also the Leinster Bay Road that the park is saying belongs to them. Those are public roads. We cannot traverse them because the park has decided that it's their property. I have a suggestion. The park, this 75% of the land that the park says that they claim, I'm going to contest that. I'm going to challenge the park to bring copies of the deeds for all of the properties that you guys say that you have. Okay? And let's go from there. And to substantiate that, I'll say this. The reason that I say that is these islands were purchased with a treaty, and that treaty identified certain stipulations with regards to property. And a lot of the issues that you have right now with regards to property disputes, you guys can't prove it. We all know that. You can't prove it. So why not resolve the issue? If you're serious about being good partners, resolve those issues. Give us back our lands that you can't prove that you own. Okay? Another issue that came up is with regards to your ownership of submerged lands. How did you do that? How were you able to accomplish that? Can anyone answer?
I know that in the Clinton administration, with regards to Buck Island, President Bill Clinton extended the monument on Buck Island to include the submerged lands, which expanded it out from 200 feet to the miles radius that it is now. And that was acts of Congress that did that.
And I respect that very much. And since you've mentioned that, let me say this. That treaty that I mentioned before, Treaty Series 629, it provides in Article 6 for property rights for people. And under Danish law, excuse me, under Danish law, if you own waterfront property, you own up to 80 feet into the water. How come we don't get that? How come we don't get that? Just a question, and before I go, I'm going to give you a copy of that particular document, and maybe someone from the park can take these numbers down, and the next time that we meet, maybe you guys can respond. I don't see anyone grabbing a pen. There we go. The first is Title 43, USC 751 and 752. The next one is Title 6. Excuse me?
Can you maybe come to the side and go?
Just so everyone knows, we have Zendaya over here and Elizabeth taking a lot of notes.
So step on the side and give them those questions.
Because we're not writing notes, we have people in the room taking critical notes.
Go ahead with your question. Go ahead.
USC 1. Sure.
Go ahead, sir.
My name is Marlon Pickering, a proud citizen of St. John, and we welcomed the National Park when they came in 1956. They were so friendly at that time, we didn't need friends of the park. Throughout the years that I've been here, I started the first YCC program. In those days, we didn't have the money locally and in Congress like we have now. What has gone wrong? I do not have anything against the National Park. As a matter of fact, when the force came, we welcomed them with open arms. But a few things struck me along the way that really ticked me off. Every so often, I've been listening to the news for the past 15, 20 years. Oh, we're bringing marine biologists in to study our corals. Or corals are being killed. I have worked with NOAA for 30 years, just on the other side of Interior. Most of the chemicals that are used on the skin is one of the biggest detrimental to corals, plus the runoff from the hills. Secondly, the St.John Act of 1960. What happened to the territorial seas of the United States Virgin Islands? Thank you. Now the National Park claim national park waters within the territorial seas. That cannot happen. That is totally wrong. According to the St.John Act of 1960. Before this act in 1960, landowners close to the waters, St.John, was able to run the fence out in the waters to protect the animals from going back and forth. Now here comes Mr. National Park and Mrs. National Park, purchase land, purchase land, and owning the territorial seas of the Virgin Islands, creating a problem. When the National Park suit up and go on patrol, we have local DPNR patrolling. I work as an agent with National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, and we had something called the lease here. Before we go and see patrol, we must contact customs to avoid an overlapping, harassing boarding. I don't think there's such an agreement with DPNR and the National Park Service, especially in these days and times that could create a big problem. Likewise, your officers in uniform. When the park first started, Edmund Roberts, Oscar James, and those guys, before they leave the National Park with the weapon, they will contact the police department head and let them know where they are going. So as to avoid, and 80% of police is discretion, to avoid harassing the public. If a police stop me doing 50 miles in a 20-mile zone, and here comes the national park and stop me again, that's harassment. These are the kind of things that we need to correct. These are the kind of things that need to be looked into before we could take action. Sorry for you who have been stopped before. I personally, as a St. Johnian, would like to apologize to you for not knowing. Secondly, we have always been peaceful, loving, joking people. Sundays you making birthday, meet me at Harkness. We bring some lunch and we have a good time. The one thing that really ticked me off is when I over there having fun on the beach, to look at a national park ranger standing there with his arm folded in the wind. What is that? That is not good. I yield my time. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm getting down to my last two questions because we have to be out of here by after 8.
Come on, man.
So let me get over here. I haven't got anybody from on this side, and I'm going to come back over here. Anybody over this side want to say anything? Thank you.
Let's put some parks
This
over
lady
there,
had a
over
question.
here.
No, but I'm asking who wants it. I'm coming back this way. So
But
give me a
sometimes the
chance.
park people are sitting over there and we are all sitting. If I look this way, I see a lot of people I know. I look this way, I see Ken Wild, I saw Laura. I know the front row. I know
Come, let's go, sir. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Good night. I'm not much of a speaker.
Yeah.
Make us proud.
The Aki you're talking about. When you have a chance.
Good night, everybody. I'm not much of a speaker. But I grew up in the South Pond area. I grew up in the South Pond area. And as a little boy, I remember my father having a boat down on South Pond Beach where he used to go fish every Saturday. He go out in the boat now. She said you can't pull a boat up and fish no more. As a kid growing up, out there we was able to have what we call a bateau. We make our bateau, we go up and down, we do our fishing in and all that stuff, we can't do all those things. And one of the things that hurt me a whole lot is to see they put a gate up at Sal Pond, stopping the seniors them and everybody from going down on that beach. I remember a lot of times, a lot of our local ones to go there and take a swim. But because of they put a gate at the distance to the beach, and the only other beach is Lamashore Beach, which you have to have a 4-wheel drive vehicle or a Gold Eye vehicle that go through those big platforms and stuff over there. I go up there and sometimes I want to go on the beach and take a little swim. I remember one time driving from all the way to my house, going all the way to Maho Bay to take a swim, where Mr. Kenneth Marsh and Mr. Ira January, the three of us used to be there for 20 years on swim. And one day, I showed up at the beach alone. I'm parked in the same area that I was parked for over 20 years. I parked in there. And what happened to me? I was pepper sprayed because they didn't like where my vehicle was parked. Fright alone, I don't know how I get out in the water. My truck, I locked my truck. I locked my truck and I had to go all the way, I had to outrun them. They take a lot of courage right now here. I want to cry. You understand? To see that my family, I grew up there. And stuff like that, it shouldn't happen. Sometimes when I'm going home in the night, and I get a job myself, when I turn out from there, I thought look about health. Just the memories are just there, I taxi, and it's a dread walk in the park, it's like, and not just that, 4 years after, or more, I own property bound with the national park, behind the clinic. One day I went up there, asked some agents, white Cherokee. I didn't even know who they was. I had my CCC signs. I told them, look, please get off my property so we all get on. Next thing you know, I was in court down there. I spent a lot of money to fight a case. And I guess stuck me with a big lawyer bill. You know. But I could go on and on, but you know.
Senator, I know you're a gentleman, and Ms. Sonia Jacobs Dow wanted to speak, and then she has to leave, so if you wanted to speak, and then Senator Jackson has some questions and wanted to participate. And thank you again for allowing use of this space and supporting.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. As our Congresswoman said, I'm Sonia Jacobs Dow from the island of St. Croix. I was over here last night for a meeting about a new humanities grant that we had and trying to find out what exists on St. John, what the needs are, how we can help build the capacity of organizations on St. John that are dealing with the humanities. And 3/4 of our meeting was spent discussing the tension, the crisis between the national park and the community on St. John. And had I not had a foot over here, I might have been surprised by that. But it has been growing and growing and growing, and we really are at a crisis level. So I have to first thank my family over here who insisted that I couldn't go back home today, go back to St. Thomas today. I had to stay for the meeting. But there are two things I wanted to say. Mr. Austin, you talked about having cultural sensitivity training for your staff. And I want to request of you that rather than cultural sensitivity training, you have cultural immersion training, so that your staff can become immersed in the culture of St. John. And there's plenty of resources here to help you develop that training. You don't need to bring anybody in to do the training. St. John is full of people. We had a group of campers from St. Thomas over here all day as they're discovering the Virgin Islands to come over, and all the resources were local people that could teach them about the culture and the history of St. John. So that's my request to you. And also that part of that training be the creation within your staff of a Friends of the St. John community. Because if your staff develops a commitment to being friends of the community, to being a part of the community, I think it will help them to better use their discretion, because they won't be dealing with strangers. They'll be dealing with people who are their friends. And that can't do anything but create good. St. John is under immense pressure. I don't know how 6,000 people live on such a small piece of such a small island, and things haven't blown apart yet. It's by the grace of God. It really is by the grace of God. And you have an opportunity with this realignment to really realign the relationship and to bring what seems like it's on the edge of a disaster and create something really good and build something really good over here. And it's really about relationships, it's about respect, it's about wanting to know and understand the culture and the people that make St. John what it is. There's water, sun, sand, and sea all over the world. But what makes St. John unique is really its history and its culture. And so my last request of you is that as this plan is being developed, that part of the strategy be to set a timetable for resolving the land issues. To perhaps set, to the extent that you're allowed to set a policy that if someone is going to donate land to the park that is going to cause a private landowner to be landlocked, that you accept it as an easement. So that no private landowner is going to be landlocked within the park. Because that feels like bullying. It feels like being 5 years old and a group of 15-year-olds surround you and you can't move until you give them your lunch kit, you give them whatever money you have, you give them whatever. That's what it feels. It really is bullying, because if someone owns land within the park and they can't access it, then they either have to spend money, they don't have to go to court, or they have to continue paying taxes in the hope that someday it'll be resolved. Let's make that a priority for the park, to resolve those issues so that you can be friends of the community and we can have a different relationship here. Those are my requests of you.
Thank you very much.
I really think that Sonia just summed it all together to why we're here this evening. And, you know, I have a real commitment to letting this be the model for the future. Now, I said earlier that the Congresswoman Plaskett, you know, is very committed to this, because she said, Stan, I want you here. But several months ago, like I mentioned, Michael Reynolds and I were sitting in her office, and she said it's not just about St. John, but it's also about the National Park Service that she represents on the government as a sub-chair committee member. But what I'm hopeful here, and that's why I'm here, and Randy and Jane and the Congress, this could be a model, because this is happening not only here, it's happening in St. Croix, but it's also happening in Selma, Alabama. It's happening at many of my sites across the country where the community has felt neglected by the park coming in. I'll give you a quick story. I used to be the superintendent of Cuyahoga Valley National Park. That park was one that was carved out of the community. If you Google it, it was anger. The people are still angry. But when I got there, we had community engagement. So we're going to use this as a model here, because I think we can make this work together. And I think what Sonia just said, the land issue and the road issues are something that keeps coming up year after year. Let's resolve that. Let's talk about that. Yeah. And then the stability training and the cultural immersion. I like that, because we have to coexist here with the visitors, people who live here, and people who are born here, and people who weren't born here. So, you know, it's a unique, but all of us together have the same passion, this beautiful place that we call the Virgin Islands National Park. People come from all over the world. When I'm in my office in Atlanta, one of the places, you know, people come call me or email me about how they can get to the Virgin Islands or what are the combinations. So you all have a very special place, and we all know that. But together, we can make this work and coexist. The Park Service is here to support you. It's your park. It is. So what I will ask for your commitment is to start engaging that. And that's the thing, you talk about 19.
We have not been the problem.
I have a question.
We
You're
have
talking
wanted
about-
to be part of the park.
Well, that's
We
right.
have not been allowed, and we have been completely rejected by the park, and that's putting it nicely.
Okay, then this is now. I'm making that commitment. The Congresswoman is making that commitment. Randy and Jane and all of us here. And then if we don't meet our commitment, then judge us. But let us have this chance. But I need all of this support. We can't go back to 1956, folks. You know, we have to think about the future, because like you said, 6,000 people are living here, and more visitors are coming. So how do we manage that? How do we work with everyone? And I know I just generated a ton of more questions, but I just think that was a great summary.
So
and
Stan,
you pulled it all
I
together.
think the first thing is you're talking about baby steps, and I agree with Sonia. As Randy found out, all of us are interrelated in a small community. I think the first thing that you need to do is change your manager on St. John, your superintendent. Lorelai Monsanto said that. I think that needs to happen. Because if you're going to actually invoke change, change means from the top down, not the bottom up.
An opportunity, and then definitely Ms. Mercer to be next.
Good evening, fellow St. Johnians, fellow Virgin Islanders, the delegate, members of the staff, National Park Service that is present from Washington, as well as regional. I'm Senate President Myron Jackson. On behalf of the 32nd Legislature, we want to thank the delegate for her engagement on this particular matter. and that likewise her efforts in the past to bring some resolution to the many conflicts, especially in the island of St. John, as it relates to the national park, its policies, and likewise its lack of engagement to the community's sensitivity over the years. You made mention of the 1950s are gone. But I think that in this centennial year, your presence here, 100 years under the American flag, is significant as it relates to the park's history, and likewise the dream not fulfilled. And that is within the creation of the federal mandate for the creation of the Virgin Islands Park. It states that the Secretary is authorized and directed to the maximum extent feasible to employ and train residents of the Virgin Islands to develop, maintain, and administer the Virgin Islands National Park. That has not fully been fulfilled. And that is a promise. That was a commitment. That was a federal statute that was made to the people of the Virgin Islands. In particular, the people of St. John, who sold their properties to make sure that the park coexisted, and that likewise their livelihood and their children's future would be secured through a relationship with the federal government that we bought into. So it's a commitment. That's number one. Number two is that over the years, from this 1950s to the 60s to present, the issues of St. Johnians as it relates to the access of their cultural resources has been one of contention. Whether it was picking or going into the forest to hunt, whether to go into the forest to cut the hoop vine, the whisk, to make the basket that was shown here. I came in, I'm not sure if it was talked about, but it's in your exhibition. And that cottage industry, as well as bay rum industry, was virtually destroyed because we were not able to cultivate and to pass on. The other issues that we've been having is that the relationship between the territorial government and the federal government has been one of contention. And what do I mean by that? As a policymaker, it's very frustrating that when we invite the national park for engagement with the community, the absence of the park because of the bureaucracy, one, permission by Washington to attend the public meeting, and the like. And in many cases, it's a farce, because it's just really, in many cases, administrators have decided that they don't want to engage the territorial government at this level in the issues relating to the people of the Virgin Islands. And I think that's a travesty. And I would ask that you correct that, and that engagement, whether we do it 3 times a year, 1 time a year, it should be engaged that the local entities, government officials, have the opportunity to engage the park and the meaningful issues relating to what our people have said to you this evening. The other area that we have a real bone of contention is that cultural resource management is from decade to decade change, and we would all agree that management comes in different degrees as it relates to the science. And one of the issues that we have had is that through these cultural resources, park management has decided what gets restored, what doesn't get restored, what shouldn't have a roof, what should remain a ruin, or what will really just go back to forest. And we've lost cultural resources because 1, you state you have no funding, 2, you don't have the resources of park management, and 3, there's no interest in reference to that particular resource. And we've had a bone of contention with the local Historic Preservation Office and the park over the years as it relates to the Section 106 compliance, and likewise your stewardship of these cultural resources that over the decades has fallen short. We could take Annenberg ruins. Some decisions have been made, and we have asked, why not put a roof over the sugar house? Since it is the only plantation of its kind in the Virgin Islands that is owned by the National Park and that assists us in the interpretation with our tradition bearers. That speaks to now the cultural resources and our intellectual property rights as it relates to this interpretation. The relationship between the park and the people of the Virgin Islands. We have been committed. We have been your friends. We have done everything possible. The fact that we don't have a school in the 21st century, in the 100 years of this anniversary of 100 years under the American flag and more than 50 years under the park, is a poor statement as it relates to both the federal and the territorial government, that our children in this land that had an environmental science program where you had park rangers that took our children to these sites that is not no longer functional, outside of making arrangements with your park rangers to visit these cultural resources, is grossly lacking. And we would like you to pay attention and to restore, and that likewise this particular school on St. John be a marriage between the park and the territorial government, that cultural resource management and environmental protection is part of the curriculum so that you can meet this mandate that Virgin Islanders should be employed and maintain the cultural resources to which you committed when this park was created. So I'm asking for these things. There are others. The community has spoken. We are just frustrated. And as a policymaker, and as a person coming out of cultural resource management, and the former Deputy Chico, I can tell you that I'm not just speaking for pie in the sky. This is my personal and as well institutional memory to the relationship to the park. And it is a gap that should not be. And we ask you to make sure that this marriage that you are telling us that you have put in place, not that we have consented, that you are telling us that you're putting in place to make it better for cultural resources management, we are holding you accountable. Thank you very much.
Good night, everybody. I came very far, okay? From west end of St. Thomas, over the water, So I've got to ask this question. Listen, and this goes go to you first, delegate, and then to the park personnel here. I host a radio show, okay? I co-host a show, and so these things come to our desk, quote unquote. And they're coming all the time about every issue in the Virgin Islands. This is one of them. And Harriet Mercer. Here's a question, and this is to you, Stacey. Is like, is there any truth to a lot of congressional members, whether the House or the Senate, or even any POTUS, before or now, owning any land and or houses on St. John? Congressional persons have an interest in this island.
I know that there are members who own homes in the Virgin Islands. I don't know which ones. I'm sure there are some who own specifically on St. John. Okay. I don't have the names of some of them. I know some anecdotally, but I have not been given a list of which ones. Yes, this is X, Y, and Z.
Don't need to know the names.
But yeah, on Water Island, on St. Thomas, on St. John, on St. Croix.
Great.
Yes.
Okay, so now we got that straight. Okay, now the next thing is this. On the desk also came where there was in 2014, December, and I shared with quite a few people in this room. December 2014, I get a law, federal statute, that says that the National Park Service was abolished.
Thank you.
Follow me. Abolished.
I'm sorry, what was abolished?
Abolished. National Park Service, not VI National Park, not VI Park Service, national. So this is via yes, National Park Service, NPS. National Park Service abolished, 2014 December. Do any of you know about that? No. Okay. Now all it says is that it was abolished, repealed, and all that kind of stuff, right? Whatever the statutes would have formed the National Park Service, was repealed, abolished, and that's what it says. But wait a minute, that's all it says. That's why I said I need clarity, and I've sent it and I've seen no response. I've sent it, I maybe sent it to your office too, I'm not sure. Whether to Cletus, whatever, but no? Yeah, I have, I think Unity did deposit too. I sent it out, and I could send it again, but I need clarity on that, because if it's abolished, now this is hypothetically, because that's what it reads. I need some clarity on what does that thing say.
Okay,
What does it mean?
I don't know where you got that from, but that did not happen, period.
Again, and I'm
just because
send it to you.
I'm just saying, just because you see something, and something comes to you, that doesn't mean that it really happened. I'm just saying that there has been no law that
I
was
know, but
passed.
Congresswoman, it's an official document. I'm not talking about something on Facebook or something
No,
somebody.
I know, but
typed
that
up.
doesn't mean that that's true. That anyone can make what looks like an official document. I'm telling you that there has been no law that was passed that repealed the National Park Service.
I'm going to tell you guys this in this room. Do your own research, okay? Because that's what I saw, that's what I read. It looks so very much from the Nexus, the different documents, you get statutes and stuff like that from the federal government, and it says December 2014 that was repealed. So I figured if it was, then of course anything under the umbrella of the National Park Service, VI Park Service, would also be moot. So I'm wondering, what is this discussion? And I'm sitting here listening and I don't understand. And now you're telling me it's not true, it didn't happen. I wish I had the document. Maybe again it's some fake thing, I don't know, but I saw it and it's as authentic as I've seen any other legislative document. Okay, and I've sent it out to people. So do your own research, don't take my word for it.
Just the federal record that has all the laws posted. You
Shut
sign
up,
it there.
Because I don't bring anything, you know. So that's what I got.
Okay. Is there another question?
No, that was it.
I'd just like to make a fast statement to the park. You guys really ought to be ashamed of yourselves. I walk every Sunday. I go into the bush, I walk everywhere. Ruins are in really disrepair. Their grave sites have been dug up. There are tombstones missing on almost every grave I've been around. And actually the park displays one of them at the historical meetings, which you really ought to be ashamed of. And to put it off, you walk down roads, if you ever get out of your offices and just take a little bit of walk, there's so much garbage throughout the park, you want to be ashamed. There's refrigerators, tires. It's an embarrassment for our national park.
All right,
Henry Powell. My name is Henry Powell. I'm a St.John. And all I basically want to do is make a statement. I think Randy mentioned that Puerto Rico had 99% Puerto Ricans in their, in the national park there. I think we should adopt here in St. John that practice in recruiting. We should recruit based on that. We need to find out how they did it, and we need to do it here. So our people can get that resource.
Good evening. My name is Myrtle Barry. I was hearing Mr. Kessler speak with reference to Friends of the Park and also the Land Trust, with reference to a school, and I wanted to know specifically if he was speaking about this land for a private school or is it earmarked for a public school? I need to know that officially tonight.
Okay, then I'll clarify. This is all in response to the community's desire to build a school in Catherineburg area. In order to acquire the land currently from the National Park Service, there has to be an equitable swap of land. We were willing to donate 4 acres of land that we own to the government in furtherance of that swap. The government would need to acquire, in theory, another 6 acres or another, excuse me, it all has to be of equal value. There's a whole complicated formula to make it happen, but essentially that would be for part of, help the government meet that swap requirement.
So to help the Virgin Islands government meet the requirement for the swap.
Correct.
With the national parks.
Correct.
For a public school.
Correct.
So it is definitely earmarked for a public school, not a private school.
Correct.
Thank you.
It's all about this whole desire by the community to build K through 12 school on St. John. And that's what we've supported since 2003 or whatever. And we've been willing to use that land to help further that cause.
Okay.
My name is Susan Wakely, and I want to follow up on Ms. Senior from East End about Edmund Roberts. He could be here now, but he retired after going all over the country. Is there anybody from St. John who's going all over the country in hopes that they will be able to come back and be a superintendent? Is there anybody? How can we get somebody from the bottom? How do we do that? So we have 99%. That's my question.
So I guess the question could be, are there Virgin Islanders who are already in the park system in other, right, is that what you're asking?
Well, I understand that in order to go up the ladder, you have to go to different parks. You have to move around. You can't just stay here. And that's what Edmund did.
So do we have people, do we know, have you identified, or is there a way for us to identify people, Virgin Islanders, St. Johnians, who are in the Park Service who could qualify? Are there local Virgin Islanders in the Park Service that you are aware of, Mr. Austin, or you, Randy, that have moved through the ranks, or have other experiences that would allow them to then take over for the parks?
Well, there are several, probably not at the level that could jump to a superintendent. I don't know the gentleman that you're referring to, but what I can say, we are developing people. We've just had a leadership class this week and last week, and there were 4 Virgin Islanders in Atlanta for training for future managers. And so, and also there's a manager that works in my office, Francis. Puerto Rico has had historically a very different model, and as someone mentioned earlier, Randy did too. It wasn't that way 10 years ago. They had a committed superintendent that made a commitment, and even when I came in 4 years ago, we were very commitment and recruiting and retaining. It's also about recruiting and retaining, but they're having the same problem but people were leaving and coming back. So you have a lot of folks that go to LA, New York, and come back to Puerto Rico, and so that's how they would be able to fill some of those positions. But Jane and Randy are committed to really developing, and I've been talking to the Congresswoman, looking at University of Virgin Islands, doing recruiting, starting people to really bring them in at the local level. Now, where I would need your help, we don't know. There's probably...
And she's done nothing. Come on. Don't sell some book of goods. You can't go there.
To wit, what?
She has been here for 3 years, and she has not done this. So why are you trying to sell some book of goods right now that she is going to accomplish this goal?
Well, there's been a few positions that she's filled, but what I'm asking you, we don't know who's out there and around the country that are native. So when these announcements that we now are going to put in the paper, and say you call someone, your friends and neighbors, and say, hey, this position's open, do you want to come back and work in the Virgin Islands? Because everyone knows somebody that might be.
So can someone conceivably be in, say I know a marine biologist, a naturalist or something who has a master's degree, who may not be in the Park Service, but has the experience and has worked in other maybe federal agencies or other capacities? Can they apply because they are a native to take those positions?
Sheila Smith is a native. She worked in the national park. She was a deputy superintendent. She was blacklisted and not hired back to the park. Absolutely.
Yep.
Well educated.
So we can develop the list.
Yes. Help us.
And what I would ask is that when that goes to usa.jobs.gov or whatever the site is, that at the same time it be published. Because I don't want it to sit on the website and we don't know about it.
Closes.
And then it closes, or it's announced in our local papers a week before it closes, and then local people don't have the opportunity to reach out and find people to apply for it.
Do we have a timeline as to when that website is going to kick off?
Well, the website's there, but what we have to do is separately. So the U.S. State Jobs is something that all positions in the national park, all federal employees have to be hired. But what we can do whenever there's an announcement about to go there, simultaneously, we can actually put that in the local newspaper, mention on the radio.
Or you could let my office know,
Let your office
and
know,
I
you
can
can put it in your website.
Can you repeat the name of the website again, please?
USAJobs.gov.
I have a question about the Cinema Bay Amphitheater.
Okay, but we have other people who've had their hands raised for a while, but I'll get to you. Sir?
Thank you.
I'm sorry, no, actually, this gentleman here, and then after, yeah, sorry.
Thank you. Good evening. The last time I attempted here in this beautiful island we call St. John to speak about the park and some of the things we were disliking and so forth, I was kicked under the bus. But here I am tonight. I'm glad to be here. Are you glad to be here, people?
Yeah.
This is 2009 that we had a situation right in the Salpan, Lamisho area where the national park came with their boats and shut down all our boats basically. That were basically left except about 3. I went to the superintendent and the deputy superintendent and they basically told me that these goats were shut down because they were eating the endangered species. I asked them what endangered species. They couldn't even tell me. I said, what does the goat eat? What does the donkey eat? What does the deer eat? Okay? They shut down our goats. Wasn't able to tell me exactly. When they couldn't deal with me no more, they took the rules and regs and threw it at me. That's how they dealt with it. I don't remember the exact 2 individuals, but I'm sure if you go back into the archives, you can find it. Another thing that I brought forward in our community here when it was July, I brought forward and mentioned about the park and how they're not sensitive to us as a people. They're not sensitive to our culture, our tradition. We'll put up a grill in every place, not every place, but most of the places, it's the campground or the park, they'll put up a grill. Put something up that says we. Where are we? Where are people who are slaving for this country? Where's that? That should be a sensitive thing. If the park is doing something, make sure you can see the St. Johnians or the African or the people who have made it to what it is. Don't you think that should be a park? We even have problems where we can't get into our properties because they're in the park. We should have access. That shouldn't be something we have to cry out about. We had roads could go through around St. John. They closed them off. They tell us they are here to protect and solve. Protect who? Solve who? These are some of the things we're still facing. I needed to say that. I need to make this clear. We are not against you all. You all come here, live among us. We want to live as free human beings. And we want to be able to go through the bush like the brother was just speaking about over here. Get some birch wood, you know, some waste, some tire palm. All these different things is what we use to make our crafts. So we could show our culture, show who we are. This is what we do. I hope you all people here talking tonight are going to be more sensitive and be with us. It's important, okay? Ashe. Hi, everybody. I had the opportunity all last year to visit all over the U.S. national parks, and I was really impressed of the amount of involvement of the park services with their communities. And they were junior forest rangers, senior citizen volunteers at the museums, so many conducting seminars in the schools, just the park rangers. Fire. We live in an island. We can catch fire anytime. I wonder if you guys have heard of those programs. I don't see a fire prevention advocating you for anything. I don't see a junior ranger program or senior volunteer or anything like that. This is just... Now, the problem of the school, we should
shouldn't be asking the park ranger to give us what their government should give us, which is a school for St. John. Why are we begging for education for our people to the Park Service that has shown that they don't want to get involved in that way? Well, we have a government that doesn't provide for it. So I wouldn't blame the park so much for a lack of education provided by the people who does our government. So if the government doesn't work, well, the park doesn't work either. My opinion.
You, sir, to speak, and then you can speak, and then we're going to try and...
Yes, good evening, I'm Larry Sewer. We're talking as the future. I have a statement, no youth, no future. All right? The park must interface in the educating system as to what is necessary. We call it careers. And this is the best way you set a timetable. 5 years down the road, based on the needs of the park, and from management to operation to facilitating whatever, it's a core development in a course that the student from an early age can aspire to. Yes, don't just say fireman, police, but again, the technological ages. The children know more than the fossils of who we are. All right? So you get from technology, what would you have mapping, GPS, whatever. My grandson is 9, he makes robots. My point is, use the information technology that is afforded the park and you introduce it to the schools. So in 5 years down the road, you know you have from worker to management level. That's what Puerto Rico does. But they tell you what's going to happen. And this is what I'm asking you. Don't tell us. We will coordinate with you. Put it in the schools so it could be the core curriculum. And the students can aspire. Because now you have a model to emulate. But if you be absent, like the absentee landlords in the early ages, nothing will happen. Annabelle, you talk about that, that's a sanctuary for me. The sacred grounds. I would like to see that, yes, you have visitors, but let them know the sacred grounds are around here. Don't just go stomping and tromping all over the place. Right? Because that way, I get upset. And then 1730 people have to come again. Serious people, I don't play. I am a source. I don't play. So if you don't want to see the melting pot that is don't have a bottom, turn upside down, start with the people. But start with the children. No youth, no future.
Good evening, everyone, to all the elders, to Senate President, Congresswoman Plaskett. I follow you on YouTube, and I look at all your, when you go up to the platform and you speak, and all of the elders in the room. I want to say good evening. My name is Carla Sewer, and I have just 2 questions. I'll keep it short. My first question is the mention of a bidding process for concessions in the park. I noticed that the Cinnamon Bay Amphitheater has been turned into a parking lot. That was a place where historical theater productions were conducted years ago. Interpretive groups would come in from the park and have interpretive performances there, and now it's turned into a parking lot. There is I've been told, a new concession group that is now in the place at the Cinnamon Bay facility. How was that process done, and was that bidding open to others, or was that something that just was negotiated within closed doors? That's my first question. My second question is on behalf of my father, who is a Vietnam veteran. His name is Khalid Sewer. He gave me this map, And the question is pertaining to the land issue of the park. There was a survey done, this is in Freeman's Ground, Coral Bay Quarters, and the Recorder of Deeds Office, Coral Bay Register. The record showed this property to be 75 acres, more or less. However, the survey shows 40 acres.
Yes.
So, as a St. Johnian and a daughter of Calisur, speaking on his behalf, as well as his grandfather Lancelot and his grandmother Mary Sewer. They call him Papa Lancy.
Yes.
And I am standing here on their behalf because they have no voice, so I am going to try to be their voice as best as I can. And those were my two questions in reference to the amphitheater, that bidding process, and in reference to these particular land surveys that are done, and what do we do, how do we bring this information to the park to try to get our lands back in Coral Bay, St. John. So this was Vern Robinson, licensed surveyor, Cruise Bay, St. John, Freeman's Ground, Coral Bay, St. John, U.S. Virgin Islands. Drawn version, date September 30th, 1965. So according to this, there's about 30 acres that are missing. I just wanted to bring this attention to the platform. I respect that you all are holding this conversation and this discourse on St. John, and I respect your presence here, and I hope that in the future something can be done for myself representing my forefathers, as well as my children sitting here right now. One is a University of the Virgin Islands student. The other one is graduated from high school, and she's going to be attending college. She's working with the park right now in the Youth Conservation Corps. She attended the Annaberg trail that they had. She felt something when she went there, and she shared it with me that I don't know who it was somebody from the interpretive division of the park. They spit, like Mr. Larry Soar said, it's sacred ground, and we should respect the ground. We shouldn't throw things or spit on the grounds and stuff like that. So I just want to see more interpretive representations of our history and of our culture by people who are our forebearers, like Miss Moorhead, to tell stories about what went on. There's a lot of people in this room who hold histories and stories that we need to share, and the park can benefit from their stories as well as passing it on to our younger generation. So I want to just say thank you for giving me this time.
About the amphitheater?
Yeah, I can answer the question about the whole concessions contract, and it was sent out as a public bidding process, so folks, there were a couple of people from the island that were interested. I don't know if they actually bid, but we did go do a walkthrough when it went out on a federal announcement, and we went and walked through with a number of different people. So they got to look at what the facilities were and then just make a decision on whether or not they bid for it. Once it goes beyond that, then we didn't actually make the decision here at the park about who would be in it. It was a national panel that did that. But
and that was the outside panel?
Mm-hmm, it was, yeah. Yeah. I would love to take a photograph of your map and then try to find out more information about that.
Now, is the new concessionaire the one who changed it from an amphitheater to a parking lot?
Yes, we allowed them to extend the parking lot to help take care of some of the parking problems in the Cinnamon Bay area. They took out the amphitheater because we didn't feel that the amphitheater was used as much as we would like it to be. However, we've been talking about within the park about where can we get that kind of activity again, and so whether or not we put in another amphitheater someplace else or find some other location for that kind of use.
Okay, Okay, so excuse me, I can't. We gotta have, people can't call out. Young man, you said you had a question?
It was more of a statement.
So you gotta speak up.
Sorry, I can speak up. I just wanted to say that obviously there's a lot of hurt in this room. And to move forward, you all are very open and speaking about how you're ready to go forward, But you need to be prepared to take the blows too. Because when you come out to the community now, we're not going to be open arms. It's just not going to be that way for a while. So don't run away, is what I'm asking. Come out, take the blows, and we'll move forward. It will happen, but it requires that level of strength and tolerance to understand that you're dealing with a very upset community. So please be vocal, be aware, be visual, and don't run behind the doors. Because I'm telling you right now that this community will come out, and they will help, and they will produce. But you have to stay visual. That's
Thank you. I think at this time, I don't know if Stan or the others will stay for a little longer to talk with people individually, but I think that having our younger generation be the last voice is the appropriate way to end the discussion. I want to thank everybody for coming out. Know that I'm committed. Stan says that he is often in my office. Stan has been, I press upon him. My carrot is that I know he is a Caribbean man, so I press that on him as to why he needs the help. But my stick is that I am the ranking member of the Interior Committee, and they do not like to come in front of the committee for questions. So know that I'm committed to being as vocal as possible on behalf of the people of the Virgin Islands, on behalf of St. Johnians. Recognize that why the youth program has started back up again. That is because our office pressed the issue. We pressed and found the money for that program to begin. That there had been questions with regard to the new campsite. We felt that it was becoming too much of a glam camping, and it was pricing people out of the ability to be on the campsites. Stan has been helpful in ensuring that that is still available to people, and we thank you for that. We have been working vigorously on St. Croix as well, which has its own issues with regard particularly to the submerged lands and the ability of local people. My father talks about every Sunday diving in Buck Island for lobster. That is no longer allowed. There's things that we all have in common, but I understand the pressing issue of the people of St. John. I understand that this is a place where the federal issues are very, very close at hand. And so we will work to that. Two things that we have said that we are going to do is we are going to talk about, one, finding Virgin Islanders who can fill those positions. You all should know that I was adamantly, when I came in the first term, had issues, very strong issues with Brian, the last park manager, Fitzgerald. Part of why he is retired is because of the issues that I've raised. And that we are also going to have working groups to talk about the other issues that we talked about. The school, the land issues as well, which are some of the major ones as well. We'll talk about lands, we'll talk about roads as well, but also interpretation of that park. That it be relevant to the people who live here as well. Okay? So thank you all so much, and thank you, Stan, for coming from Atlanta. Thank you, Senator Jackson, for facilitating this as well, for us to be able to speak. Thank you, Jane, and thank you, Randy. We look forward to working with you.
Oh, yeah.
My boss.